This episode of the Open Sourcing Mental Illness Podcast is brought to you by the PHP Roundtable, phproundtable.com, the PHP podcast where everyone chimes in. Welcome to the Open Sourcing Mental Illness Podcast. Each episode is an interview with someone from the tech community that has been impacted by mental health issues. My name's Joe Ferguson. I'm a board member for the Open Sourcing Mental Illness, a 501c3 nonprofit charity that's focused on changing how we talk about the mental health issues in our tech industry. Today I'm talking with Lindsey Kopacz. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for joining me. This is the second ever episode we've done. We don't really have a format, so as I'm looking at my notes, there is nothing else, and we have about 40 minutes to kill before I have to go do something else. So what do you want to talk about to put you on the spot?
I think this is actually just a really important topic, not just for, open source, but also for being in the professional community in general. And over the years, I've developed a lot of opinions about this. I try not to ramble too much about it, but the biggest thing that I've learned is about the separation between personal and professional, and how I actually don't think it should be as clear cut. I think everything that impacts our personal lives has some sort of overflow into the professional community. I can kind of ramble on about that because, that is who I am. But first, I should probably talk about what I struggle with mental illness to give a little bit more context.
Yes, please lay down on the couch and tell us all about your childhood problems.
Please, So I was diagnosed when I was younger with ADHD and also with an anxiety disorder. I can't remember the super clinical, classification or whatever, but it's definitely had a lot of impacts on my life and just how I lead my day to day. So something that I've encouraged myself to do, not just in my personal life, but in my professional life, is just being very, very open about it, which is insanely vulnerable. Insanely vulnerable place to be. But something that actually inspires me a lot about Ed, who, does a lot, is the lead of OSMI, is essentially, being open and being vulnerable and overcoming that fear, and how much more you can benefit from it.
And it's really difficult for for looking at it from an aspect of the tech community, because there is so much rivalry, and you have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to be really, really smart. You have to be strong. You can't be vulnerable or anything. So it's really hard to talk about that kind of stuff, especially in work. And that's everything we've seen through the open sourcing mental illness, the mental illness and technology field surveys that we do every year just backs that data up and says that people are uncomfortable talking about this. They don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to look like they're weaker than their competition or other coworkers or whatnot. But what I've found is when you can have those honest conversations, especially with your boss, and be like, look, this is what I have going on, it actually opens up a lot more honesty and overall dialogue between you and your employer.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that, because once I was braver about it and just admitted, hey, I'm having a crappy day, and just going over to my boss and being like, I'm about to have a mental breakdown, and I'm going to talk to you about it first, because if I talk to you about it first, I am not going to have a mental breakdown on a client. I think a lot of people actually appreciate that, and it doesn't necessarily show a sign of weakness. It shows a sign of, I'm aware of what's going on.
Right.
I'm aware of what's going on in my head. I know what issues I struggle with. And
it's the exact same correlation of, you wake up and you have the flu. You're sick. You're sick. That's a relatable thing. You could tell your boss, hey, I have the flu. Your boss knows exactly what you're going through. But if you're telling your boss, hey, my anxiety just won't let me get out of bed. It won't let me leave the house. That's a little bit of a harder thing for a boss to understand, because they may not have gone through it. They may not know about it.
Yeah.
So being able to talk to your boss and be like, yes, this is actually a real thing. That's a huge, huge deal.
So I think also, particularly with anxiety issues, anxiety is so prevalent in our community in general, like, because of what you were talking about before. Like, there's so much competitiveness. There's like, oh, if I'm not the best, then I'm not hireable. like
I have to know everything.
I have
I have to know it all.
exactly. I have to know it all. And if I have to go, research and answer, that means I'm weak, because that means I don't know it off the top of my head. And
Right. You're not a senior engineer if you have to go look something up or whatever that nonsense may be. And it feeds right into the imposter syndrome where I can't let anybody figure out that I have to go Google how to do a syntax thing in this language.
Yeah. And imposter syndrome actually is one of those things that is so connected to this topic. And I think a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome. And it's almost like I don't want to say the mask but it's the acceptable thing to talk about in this community.
Right. It's not a branded thing because people can just pass it off as, oh, they're just insecure, when it actually feeds into anxiety and depression and all these other diagnoses that you could have, where it just is so crippling. I mean, the previous job I had, I would have episodes where I would just shut down and just couldn't function because everything was on a timetable. Every minute of my day had to be accounted for, and I would just try to start my day and just completely break down and not be able to function. And it was so crippling. And then knowing the triggers of that and knowing how to deal with that is really what kind of helped me. And it's different for everyone. For me, it was creating lists and tasks and realizing that there wasn't an insurmountable goal to get through the day.
Right. And so something I've actually learned a lot in the past year or two is how being self-aware about the issues you struggle with actually makes you much more productive. Like, you were saying learning the strategies. And for me, something I have difficulty with is seeing a bigger picture of everything. So it's kind of funny because one of my coworkers told me that I was her favorite because she knew she could trust me when I said I was going to get something done or I wasn't going to get something done. And I was really accountable on that. But that's because I don't want to say I got over myself because that's not really sensitive. That's not really nice to say to myself. So I'm trying to, stop that. But kind of being like, hey, I have trouble with big pictures. But if I'm like, okay, what's the priority of this and this and this? And
right.
then
And
breaking it down.
Knowing your weakness, right? Knowing where you're not going to be good at something just makes you fit better into the team as long as your team is complementary to your weaknesses and your strengths work with their weaknesses and such.
Yeah.
That was a thing for me too, is getting over the fact that I didn't know everything and I was never going to know everything, but that yes, I did deserve to be in the job that I had because I am smart and I do know how to do these things.
Yeah, that's really something that helped me a lot. I recently got hired at a new job, which is really exciting for me, and it's a job that I never imagined I'd be capable of getting. Like, I thought, oh, everybody there is so smart. Everybody there is just a rock star, and they're super intelligent, and they're code monkeys or whatever, whatever the new thing to call a really smart coder is like, there's just all sorts of things. And I'm just like, that's just not who I am. Like, I am a coder, but like the way I think is, I think, more valuable. And, even though, I had my code samples scrutinized and all of that, I think what got me hired is the fact that I was pretty open about the types of issues I had and how I approach things. And I think they all said that I was so, like, they were really impressed with that. And, for me, I'm just like, well, I'm glad, because I was totally I was kind of taking a risk of being unapologetically myself.
Right, absolutely.
I opened up about the fact that I have ADHD and it causes me to be a scatterbrain. But something that one of my friends told me once is, because I always, assume, oh, I must be disorganized because I'm a scatterbrain. But, I learned organization is actually an action, not a description of somebody.
Right, absolutely.
And my friend was like, Lindsey, you are one of the most organized people I know. And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? But she... like, I still laugh about that because I just remember how shocked my reaction was, because I just always associated myself as I'm this ADHD person who forgets her keys in the most random places. And, but something I do is I create routines for myself, like whenever I get into my house, I always put my keys in the same place. I always put my wallet in the same place. And I always put because if I put it anyplace else that is not there, it's like it'll wind up in the refrigerator or something. I mean, quite frankly. So, but, it's the same type of thing too. Like, that's one of my coping mechanisms. And whenever, I leave an Uber. I didn't take anything out of my bag, but I will check to make sure that I did not leave,
Right.
like take out my wallet or something and leave it there, because you never know. And I think that is a sign of my organization. I might have this issue that I struggle with, and if I don't put something a certain place, I will get lost, but I am organized enough to know a coping mechanism for me. And I think people forget that if like you're allowed to cope with things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
one of the things I realized after I started some medication was I became really self-aware of what would otherwise put me off or cause a panic attack, or I started to see all these triggers, and I still am finding new ones every day, but it's the idea that I could be in a situation where, previously that would have messed with me, that would have caused this big chaos event, I would have shut down and run away, but now I can deal with it because I know the triggers, I know what to avoid, or I know how to react. Instead of hitting that flight or fight response, it actually I can stop it before it hits that point, and that has helped with coping as well for me with anxiety a lot.
Yeah, it's always a struggle, because anxiety, I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like you're gonna start nodding your head here, but like you start thinking, and you're like, okay, all right, there's this thing, I need to get this done, and then you start noticing that you're anxious about it, and then you're like, oh my god, why am I anxious about this? Oh my god, why am I anxious about the fact that I'm anxious about it? And then it's
a vicious cycle.
It completely snowballs into this insane thing. And I think I also take meds, but I did meditation, and now I don't do it as much anymore. But when I did, something that was really valuable is being like, yeah, it's okay. Like, shit pops up in your head, and that's fine. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to cuss, but
no, it's totally fine.
That's how it organically came in. And he, sometimes stuff will come in, and that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
And it's actually much more human. The difference between, somebody who quote unquote has anxiety is somebody who has a little more difficulty stopping that and being like, it's okay. Like, we feel ashamed to have it. And it triggers like into this huge snowball. Like, my boyfriend has like normal anxiety, where he'll just be anxious about something, and he'll be like, okay, I'm gonna go through my day, and I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, how do you do that?
Yes, teach me the ways. Yes.
But like, it's just, but that that's a normal thing to have anxiety. It's just like, finding a coping mechanism of how to stop it from snowballing and spiraling it down a rabbit hole.
Right. How do you stop it before it cripples you into this like mess in the corner, curled up in the fetal position?
Yeah. Cripple, it's kind of, well, not funny, not like haha funny, but like, you talk about crippling, like how it can cripple you, and it's just like, it is so real when I'm feeling very comfortable with who I am as a person and not feeling ashamed or hard on myself. I can get out of bed even if I'm having like not the most ideal day. It's just, we put so much pressure on things being ideal. Like, I think actually something I read once is a lot of anxiety is forcing ourselves to feel happy, and I thought that was like really intuitive. I'm like, because sometimes we have crappy days, and that's okay, but we get so caught up in like, why are we having a crappy day? Like, blah, 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 blah.
It's okay to not be happy 100% of the time, all the time, every day.
Have you seen Inside Out?
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. So once I had this like emotional discovery of it's okay to be sad, I saw this movie, and Is
that the movie where all of the emotions of Inside are different characters? Okay.
Yeah, and then so like there's this character, I'm gonna give away a little bit of it because it's very relevant to what I'm talking about, but there's like the happiness or joy, there's joy, and then there's sadness, and then joy is just like, no, we're gonna be happy now, and blah blah blah, and like goes and runs, and like the girl is going through some harder things, like she moved to another city, left all her friends, and I mean that was hard for her, and so like she couldn't always be peppy and positive all the time, and and the thing that was great about it is sadness is probably ironically a very good comic relief for that movie. But it's really probably my favorite character was sadness, because sometimes when you have sadness, you develop relationships, and
Right.
you have people who comfort you, and then something good can come from it, even if it's not happiness. And like all emotions are fluid, right?
Sure.
And I think that I remember my boyfriend had just been away for 2 weeks, and I remember he's like, let's go see Inside Out. My brother says it's really good. And he's more of a stoic emotional, and I'm the type who cries over like every single emotion I have, whether it's happiness or sadness or anger or whatever. I cry like all the time, and I'm totally okay with that. But he's more of a stoic emotional, and he comes and we're sitting there, and I'm just heavily sobbing through this movie because I had just made all these realizations that summer about like
Right.
how it's okay to be sad, and I'm just like, oh, I can't handle my life. But he's just like, he looks at me and he just gives me a like loving pat on the thigh and was like, it's gonna be okay. And I'm like, I know, but you should see it, by the way.
Yes, I'll have to check this out.
It's good. Just like, you're not wearing mascara, so you'll be okay.
Yeah, not today. I'm not. Yes.
Don't wear mascara. Fair warning.
So on the topic of a lot of what OSMI does as an organization in terms of raising awareness in mental health in the tech industry, have you run into anything, I guess, in the workplace that has been super hard to do because of mental illness or because someone wasn't open to the idea?
Yeah, so not so much at my current employer, but at past employers. I felt like there was this pressure to, because I was a newer junior, right? And I felt this like internal pressure. First of all, I was inexperienced in the community, not even just as a developer, but like I didn't know how the community operated. I didn't know, hey, this is like imposter syndrome's a real thing. Even with like really high level senior people, like they still feel that. So like I just thought, oh my God, I'm weird and I don't belong here. They're gonna find me out. And it was kind of harder for me because my employer like didn't really get it, and I don't know how to put it in a way that's like unflattering. But it's just I think they didn't really have somebody to talk to about those things. Like I thought if I revealed how I felt about things, I wasn't going to get a raise, or
You wouldn't fit in anymore.
I wouldn't fit in anymore. Like all of these people were so smart and super confident in their skills, but then they must be smart and really confident in the fact that they're smart. Like I'm not confident in the fact that I'm smart, even though deep down I know I'm a bright girl, but I just, I thought they're gonna find me out.
I think if managers or company cultures that have never had to deal with it and they have no experience with it, I understand where they're coming from, where they don't know how to deal with it, and I don't begrudge them for, I guess, not handling it the right way. But and that's the whole point of OSMI, is to try to raise awareness to where they can handle it in a better way, and that's why OSMI is trying to partner with as many organizations as we can to kind of help give them the resources that they can use before they have to deal with something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, there's never going to be a right way to handle
Oh,
something.
absolutely
I
not.
think that's
No.
like also something that I've had to accept, that sometimes I try to handle things in the most emotionally healthy way, but sometimes I'm going to have a meltdown, and that's okay.
Right.
And if I upset people because I have a meltdown, I will talk to them about it and be like, this is what I was going through, and I'm sorry, I'll try to learn to handle it better. But when I this is a personal example, but like sometimes I would have meltdowns in front of my boyfriend because I was afraid of having a meltdown in front of my boyfriend.
That vicious cycle again.
Vicious cycle. But once I learned that I could trust him to not leave me because I was having a meltdown, I learned that it was okay to have a meltdown. And ironically, my meltdowns, I don't want to say they stopped. They still happen from time to time, but they significantly reduced.
Right.
And I think it's, honestly, I know that's a personal example, but I think that applies a lot to work. If you feel comfortable and safe to be, air quote, a mess.
Yeah, you won't have to hide it.
You won't have to hide it.
If any, you won't have to hide it, because you can just go to your boss or your supervisor and say like, hey, this is going on, and potentially even head off a meltdown or an event or some breakdown.
Right. The worst thing is when you feel so God, this happened to me at my last job where I was so upset, and it was open office too, so I couldn't even like hide in my cube. You know, it was like all open, and I just like, you know, I wanted to cry, and I just felt like, I remember going into a bathroom stall quietly as I could, sobbing, and then like doing that thing where I force myself to smile so like the redness in my eyes goes away. And I'm like, I don't think, considering I'm like a self-proclaimed crier of every emotion I haven't cried at work in a long time because I felt safe to cry, you know. And I think when it comes down to it, crying is actually, I mean, some people aren't criers. I am, but like expressing your emotions, whether it's not through crying and just talking, or if it's through crying and sobbing through your talks, then I mean, that's okay. And I think honestly, you're talking about like, there's the trying to help people with better ways of approaching it. You know, I think something that I know that OSMI does is they say like, this is better for your productivity. And I'm so much more productive when I feel safe to be emotional.
Absolutely.
Because we are all humans. Companies
there's
contain
so
humans.
much productivity lost when you have an employee that's struggling with something that they can't talk to their employer about. And obviously not every employer is going to want to talk about that kind of stuff with their employees, and that's fine. But if you're forcing an employee to try to work through a major meltdown or a stressful incident, you're not going to get any productivity out of that employee.
Yeah, you're better off giving them PTO for the day. You know,
exactly.
You don't want to bill your clients for their meltdowns,
exactly.
right? Like,
right. You're not going to
standpoint.
get quality work out of that employee no matter what you're doing. So I've never written good code in the middle of a meltdown. I don't know about anybody else. I'm just going to say the Balmer Peak is a real thing. Just be careful.
Yeah.
I have written really good code in the Balmer Peak, but never during a meltdown.
No. Yeah, I've like, I mean, it's just one of those things that like, I can't stress enough how important it is to like try to talk to people about it, because, you know, even though if you don't feel safe to talk about it, maybe you shouldn't be working there. If like that's
true.
The thing is, if you do you know, put yourself out there and then they don't react well, like they might not get it, but they can still, I think people forget that not getting it doesn't mean reacting poorly, right? Like reacting poorly is coming off as like defensive and mean and unsympathetic, where some people can, you know, might not know what to say, but you can tell they're still listening, you know. And that's also very important to get. Like, I've had people who don't get what I'm going through, and you know what, they're not me. It's almost like it would probably be insulting for them to be like, I know exactly what you're going
absolutely
through.
No, you can't pander to that at all. And that's one of the reasons I want to take a mental health first aid course. Is they teach that is a course that OSMI recommends that you can take, and you can look up local places in your area that will offer that as a class. It's usually a full day Saturday. Sometimes you pay $10 or $15 and you get a lunch, but they teach you how to deal with someone who could be having a mental breakdown. And it's not like they teach you to sit them down and to, you know, ask them about their family or their problems or anything. It's just it's a lot of, don't do this, do this, say this, don't say that. Don't go up to them and just say, stop being sad.
God. If only I had thought of that. Thank you.
Right. Yes, I didn't think of that at all.
Don't be sad.
Oh, you just cured my depression. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's almost like laughable hearing people say that. Just don't be sad. And I'm like, I know sometimes it comes from a positive place, but I'm just like, you know, if it was really that easy, we wouldn't be talking about this.
And that's one of the things that always stands out in Ed's talks is he looks around in the audience and he says, okay, I see a lot of people wearing glasses, but nobody is ashamed of the fact that they're wearing glasses. Has anybody come up to you and said, have you just tried squinting? Because it's the same response as, well, just have you tried not being sad?
Yeah.
Or not being anxious? If only it was that easy. Yeah,
well, ironically, what I was talking about before is like telling myself not to be anxious creates a downward spiral of a downward spiral of anxiety.
Yes.
Telling myself not to be anxious, because that creates the shame, and the shame is usually what leads to a lot of mental breakdowns, at least for me personally.
I usually have to work myself up for a lot of things, and some things can take days. I don't deal with surprises very well. Like surprise events, like if the wife says, "Oh, we're doing this thing tomorrow," she knows she has to give me a lot of notice, or else I'm just going to not enjoy it, and I'll just be freaking out because it's like, "Oh my God, I'm not mentally prepared for this." Medication helps a lot with that, but it's a lot of mental preparation on my part to be like, yes, I'm going to go there and do this thing, and it's going to be okay. They're not all going to laugh at me.
Right. Yeah. It is. I mean, it's kind of weird because there's a few things that like I'm actually fine with surprises, but there are other things that I'm like, oh my God, like that will send me into a freak out. And, I'm trying to think of what, I can't think of anything now because, of course I feel a little more on the spot. I'm like, oh wait, there's all these things. Wait, just kidding. I can't remember. But yeah, it's kind of, I think also that is understanding what people's triggers are, because sometimes there is not a rhyme or reason. Like it's not something we're conscious of. Like even something relating it to biology. I pass out almost every time I get my blood drawn, but I am not afraid of needles at all. I have no idea.
Oh, interesting.
I am not afraid of needles. I don't even think it hurts. Getting a shot for me is no big deal, but it's specifically getting blood drawn. And it's kind of funny because, I tell people this, and I've had people at like LabCorps or whatever, you get your blood taken, and they think it's about pain. And I'm like, it is not about
So
pain.
is it like full fainting goat, you just fall out, or?
Well, I just tell them, I always say, I'm like, hey, I would really prefer laying down to get my blood drawn because this is what's happened to me in the past. And this one girl, I remember, she's like, honey, it's gonna be fine. I'm so gentle. And
Just
I'm like,
try not to pass out.
I'm just like, it kind of bit her in the butt because like I was fine, and I'm like, yes, you were right, you were very gentle, but I said this with no color in my face because I was about to pass out, even though I was totally fine, So I think that's the whole thing is, even relatively speaking, or comparing that to mental health, is when people tell you, or when you tell somebody, hey, this is something that I struggle with, and then somebody comes back and says, yeah, but I will handle this very well, or something like that.
Right.
Like, I deal with this kind of anxiety, and they're like, it's going to be totally okay. Don't worry. Like this and this and this and this happened. Like, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, look, can you just listen to me? Like,
I know it's going to be okay, but until it is, I'm not going to think it's going to be.
And I just need to know that you're going to be my friend, or, significant other, whoever I'm relating to you, my mom, whatever. And if whoever I'm having this conversation with, I just, all I need is you to be my rock. If I'm reaching out to you,
right,
I need you to be that like stable person who I know will accept me if things go sour. And if that goes sour, then I know it's
and sometimes
okay.
That's just somebody to listen, or somebody to rant to.
Yeah, I know, right? We never need rants in the tech community, right?
Not at all, yeah. Especially not ranting.
Yeah.
Never do that.
Yeah, no, but it is. I think it's good though that this organization exists, because it is such an important topic, and it's important because mental health is good for, or mental health awareness is good for productivity, and it's better for happier employees, like in general. I am a lot less likely to leave an employer because I'm unhappy there, even if things are like less than ideal. If I know that my employer understands me, I think that's almost like a unicorn.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're so happy about that.
I learned long ago that the job will never love you back, so you have to kind of be careful with how committed you are to a job, because they're never going to love you back. It's always going to be a one-way thing. But there are cultures and the jobs out there that will at least respect you enough and be able to listen to your concerns. Mm-hmm. They don't be able to solve all your problems, but
I mean, yeah, there's always like a lot of layers of complexity in organizations. But sorry, I thought I had a burp. But I'm much more likely to stay at a company for a longer period of time if I know that they respect the fact that I have my own issues, because they understand that listening to it means that I'm a more productive employee. And I mean, for me personally, I feel so much better about life when I have had a productive day at work.
Absolutely.
So even though it's like kind of like, oh, their bottom line of productivity, I'm like, no, as a human who really cares about having a job, I even if I did something I really was so boring, if I had a productive day but it was boring, I still consider that a really fun day. It sounds, I know,
Absolutely.
I know I couldn't contradict myself, but it was a fun day because I felt like I got stuff done and I didn't have an anxiety attack. And I'm just like, this is great.
Some days, those are the best days.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Would you like to plug anything for our listeners, where they can find you on social media?
Oh, sure. Well, I talk about, mental health and feminism and all sorts of fun. Sometimes, throwing a little tech in there. But my Twitter handle is Little Cope, Kope, 0903. And that's all of my handles on almost every single thing that I'm on. Like most of my Slack channels.
Easy to find.
Easy to find, yeah.
Awesome.
My Drupal.org handle, everything. So.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.